Get strong.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's The Beautiful Bag podcast. I am here with a very special guest, Heather Moffatt. She reached out to me on Instagram. We've been following each other on Instagram for a while, and I do say this pretty much every week. You know, social media is the place to be if you want to really build your community and your friendships with other ostomates. They're out there. Just go and go and search the hashtag ostomy, and you'll find it. And the other thing I want to do as well is, if, you know, listening to this show, if this is bringing you, you know, some inspiration, or you love the story, share the podcast, share it out on your social media platforms as well, because the more we can get this podcast out there, the more awareness we'll have, and the faster we can break that stigma that's around being in an ostomy that we think it is, but it really isn't. So anyways, I want to welcome our guest. Heather, welcome to the show this week.
Hi, thank you for so much for allowing me to share my story on your platform today. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here too, because you've had, you know, I know a little bit about your story. I mean, you've gone through, you know, a roller coaster ride since, I'd say, 2009, like for quite a while. You know, the last 11 years or so, it's been a roller coaster ride for you. So, you know, why don't we start with that? Because 2009, you were diagnosed with UC. So you've gone through UC. I can't even say the colitis. So you've had colitis, Crohn's, and cancer.
Yes, and actually, it's been a lifelong journey. I've had stomach issues since I was a little kid, going to doctors, you know, and they would say, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. Or I remember in second grade, they didn't do any type of scope or anything, but my doctor at the time told me, oh, I think you have stomach ulcers. So he gave me some medication then, you know, and so it just progressively got worse. And for a long time, I just thought, you know, okay, well, this is normal. You know, this is just how I am. I'm just supposed to not feel good all the time. But then about 2008, I started bleeding rectally a little bit here and there. And it wasn't a lot, it was just a little. And I remember telling my mom, I'm like, I think there's something wrong. And she's like, if it gets worse, you know, we'll see. Anyway, I grew up in a smaller town in Central California, and the doctors there honestly weren't very good. So come 2009, when I am just in excruciating pain, the toilet looked like a murder had taken place, you know. I was like, Mom, I'm worried, but I said, I don't want to see a doctor here. I said, I've been dealing with them my whole life, and nobody can tell me what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And she said, well, and we were about an hour out of LA, and then about an hour and a half from Santa Barbara. And they both have Cedar Sinai in LA is really good, or Sansum Clinic in Santa Barbara. So I said, let's just go to Santa Barbara and see what we can find. So I called, and they said, oh, well, we can't get you in for like 3 or 4 months. And I'm like, I need to see somebody now. And the woman I spoke to was really kind. She said, let me tell you what to do. She's like, you go to our urgent care. She said, they will run some tests on you. Obviously, she said, I'm sure they'll all come back negative, but then they can make an appointment for you. And she said, we could probably see you within the next week or two.
Isn't it amazing how you have to almost sometimes take it into your own hands to try to get results? I hear that multiple times, you know, from other people that, you know, have been on the podcast, where there's always a workaround around it. So, you know, for you listeners, that was a very important thing that Heather just said, that she learned to do from a nurse, or from, you know, from the doctor's office, to get in faster. You know, if it's an emergency, if it's something that's seriously not wrong, seriously wrong, go to the emergency room and, use that back door, Heather. That's amazing. So what
Yeah.
happened from that? So you go to the urgent care and then.
So I go to the urgent care, they obviously test for parasites and all kinds of other things. They all come back negative. They make the appointment. About 2 weeks later, I had to go back to Santa Barbara and I saw a GI. And he was amazing. It was the first time I felt like a doctor actually took the time to listen to me. He took about an hour and a half just to sit, ask about my history. We scheduled the colonoscopy. I think that appointment he did a sigmoidoscopy and he was like, okay, there's some issues. Let's schedule the colonoscopy. So I went in and he originally diagnosed me with ulcerative colitis. And he told me at the time, he said, your case is the worst I have ever seen.
Wow.
And so he obviously, just from the first visit with the sigmoidoscopy, he started me on, medications like the Asacol and, what they usually start you with. And from the beginning, medications just didn't work for me. My first hospital visit was in May of 2009, and I was in there for about a week. At that time, there weren't a lot of biologics available. I think Remicade was the only one for UC, and they were starting to use Humira, but it hadn't been approved by the FDA yet. So luckily, though, because I did live out of town, he's like, I don't want to start you on the Remicade because you're not local, so I can't monitor you very well. He said, let's try and see if we can get Humira approved through your insurance, and then we'll go from there. Well, they did. They approved it.
Okay.
So I did Humira for probably a year and a half, 2 years. And again, just the medication, it wasn't working for me. I was deteriorating. My GI had told me at the time, he said, it is a possibility that you could lose your colon. He said, but I don't like to do that unless it's a last resort. But I had such a bad case that it got to a point where he said, I don't even think it's going to help taking your colon out. He said, you may as well just go home and enjoy the time you have left on this earth. And to be honest,
my goodness,
with you, I wasn't enjoying life. You know what I mean? I was bedridden pretty much. Just to get up to go to the bathroom, I felt like I had run a marathon and my legs weighed a ton. I had no energy. I couldn't bathe myself. I ended up losing my job. I lost my home. Luckily, I've never been married and don't have kids, so I didn't have to worry about that, but I had to move back in with my parents. My mom would have to bathe me every few days, I couldn't eat anything. I was constantly throwing up. And so, I was kind of just sent home to die.
So what happens from there? So you're sent home to die. You're told that there's nothing much we can do. Removing your colon wouldn't help. And this is back in 2009 or 2000.
So this would have probably been towards the end of 2010.
Okay.
So about almost 2 years from my diagnosis.
Okay. So now you're home, you're sent home to die, but you're still here. So that didn't work, which is a good thing, right? Yeah. Not ready yet. Not my time yet. I'm not going.
No, I wasn't. He wasn't ready for me to come home yet.
Exactly.
But I got down to less than 80 pounds. I was just bone and skin pretty much. I remember one day I would switch during the day to lay in my parents' bed because I was just lying around, because I had no energy and was so fatigued that the springs in my bed were poking in all my bones. So during the day when my parents would go to work, I would go lay in their bed just to have like a different.
A different feel.
Exactly. And I remember laying there one day, and a good friend of mine who was a hairstylist, or she is a hairstylist, had been working on a client of hers, and who also had Crohn's, or that had Crohn's, and she had gone to see a nutritionist like maybe 6 months before, and the nutritionist had told her to eliminate gluten from her diet. Well, this was before gluten was a buzzword, you know.
Mhm.
So as soon as she was done with the client, she called me and she said, I don't know if it'll help, but it might be something you want to look into. And so I was like, okay. So as soon as I hung up with her, you know, I started researching like, what is gluten? Like, how does it affect the body, you know? And um, I would, when I was awake, I would spend hours researching, you know, and I'd come across books. So I'd order books and, you know, and from that phone call, I just went cold turkey and eliminated gluten. And what was funny is during my initial diagnosis, I had told my doctor, because I felt like the only things I could keep down was like bread or pastries, things that really aren't good for us, right?
Right,
And he
right.
said, well, at least you're getting nutrients in your body, you know?
Well,
Well,
it's
then,
amazing. It's amazing how you talk to any doctor, any surgeon, any doctor, they spend 15 years in college to become a doctor, to become a specialist, to become a GI doctor. And they probably spend 2 weeks, maybe a month talking about nutrition and food. And that gets me every single time because
no.
we are food. Our bodies are food. Like we are the vitamins and minerals and the nutrition that we take in. That is who we are. And it's
Yeah.
amazing that they're not trained on that. So this must have led to you because you, like me, are a holistic health coach, right? So go down that path of that's it. I'm going to understand this. I'm going to understand taking out gluten. So you take out gluten, and how did you feel
You
taking it
know,
out?
um, and like with any health journey, and I always tell people this, when you start, it's not a quick fix.
Mhm.
It took me 6 months to finally feel the effects of eliminating just that from my diet.
Mhm.
You know, it was a slow process, you know, and the whole time I'm still educating myself. Um, but yeah, it took about, and it didn't clear up everything right away, you know. But it allowed me to get some stamina back into my, you know, some energy so I could kind of start doing things again. Um, but that whole experience for me just led me down the rabbit hole of health,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know. From that point, you know, and at first, because I did eat the American diet originally, you know, I was eating fast food, drinking sodas, you know, most of my meals were out at a restaurant 3 or 4 times a week, you know, not realizing that it's not the best quality. And that had an effect, you know, over my life of getting me to the place that I was at.
Right.
And so, going down that, I started, you know, quitting sodas, stopped eating fast food, started cooking at home more. Um, then about, maybe 2015, I started to have another episode to where I was having a lot of pain and fatigue and wanting to sleep. And my brother's a pastor of a church, and the people of his church got together some money and they sent me to a biodynamic wellness center. And they're the ones that really taught me the importance of eating organic
Mhm.
and, you know, how the chemicals are in our food. So then that just opened the door up to a whole nother, you know, part of my health journey, you know, and learning how to cook things from scratch, that people everyone laughs. They're like, oh, you should open a restaurant. They're like, you can't tell that your food's gluten-free or.
Right. Because usually you think like gluten-free, you're thinking your pasta is going to taste like cardboard. And, it's amazing what you can put together when you start to learn about, things like our microbiome, right? Like our gut health, which is a lot of what we deal with, or what people with, ulcer colitis and Crohn's you deal with it. That's all gut health. And it's amazing when you start down that rabbit hole of this is good for me, this isn't good for me, organic, getting the chemicals out of our bodies, getting the chemicals out of our food, eating organic meats, because even if you're looking at like, oh, well, it says, pasture free, free range chicken, which is great, but is it organic? What are they feeding that chicken?
Exactly.
The antibiotics that they put in, that they give to animals too, to make them fatter faster.
Yeah.
Right. And then we're ingesting that and we're sitting with that. And so all of that sits inside our bodies, and we're full of viruses as it is. And then everything just feasts off each other. It can get a little scary, but when you start to understand the power of, let's say, an organic fruit, organic vegetables, organic meats, healthy fats, and ways to get that into your body, it can really, really change everything, the dynamics on everything.
Yeah, well, like you said, we are what we eat. What we eat is what creates our body. And so if we're eating chemicals, that's no wonder we're going to get sick if we're not feeding it the nutrients that we need. And there's so many people that are just nutrient deficient. They're not eating the vitamins and minerals they need every day to keep themselves healthy. And it just breaks my heart.
I agree with you on that. I was listening to another podcast yesterday, and it was talking about they did a study, and it was two separate studies, and one was just a cheese sandwich, right? One group was fed, whole grain organic bread with real cheese, like a real cheese sandwich, right?
Cheese.
Like raw cheese, like the real stuff. And then the other was just white bread with like the Kraft single thrown on there. And what the study had taught was that the way your body absorbed and used the energy, your body used the energy of the whole grain, real cheese food. It processed it faster, and it gave them more energy than the other. And the other thing is 50% of half of the calories in that second meal sat within these people for weeks. Your body never processed it, because it sat in there and it got in, it can get into your cells and just sit there, because your body doesn't know how to process all these chemicals, and it wasn't real food. Right. So it's just amazing. Just those little tweaks and changes in small things can make a huge difference, especially like you said, over time. It wasn't something you took gluten out. It wasn't something that changed you overnight. It took 6 months for you to really start to feel the effects of it.
Right.
However, small things over time can really help, and those changes are huge.
Yep, they are huge. And going back a little bit to 2015, before I went to the Biodynamic Wellness Center, I had gone and I saw a GI down at UC San Diego who's supposed to be one of the best in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, he was the one that diagnosed me with Crohn's at that point.
Okay.
And he had me do Remicade, and I did 2 infusions, and I just didn't feel right. There was something about it, and I had brought up my concerns to him, and I told him, I said, I feel like the pain is still there, but it's just making me numb to where I can't feel it. And he just blew it off. He's like, oh, that just means your body's healing. So when I saw the biodynamic wellness people and they started really teaching me about organic and all of that, I just stopped Remicade. I didn't even tell him. I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. You obviously aren't going to listen, so I'm just going to do my own thing.
Well, I mean, sometimes too, like we said, a lot of the doctors aren't trained in nutrition right. They're trained the way they're trained. They're specialists in what they know. And so for him, he probably did think this was just your body's way of getting used to the medication to take over, right? Where you started to intuitively understand your body, right? Because you were starting to study holistic, you were starting to, do your own research and really understand the nutritional part of it. He knew what he knew, and he was doing what he does, and it probably was working for other people. But for you, you were so intuitive, so into what was going on with your body. You felt it masking the pain, not truly taking it away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I've said my whole journey, like, in order to be healthy, we need a whole team, So it wasn't only the food that I was changing, I went and saw a therapist to overcome limiting beliefs that I didn't even know I had at the time, but then when they started pointing things out, I'm like, yeah, you're right. That doesn't align with how I feel, that was something that I learned when I was a kid, or I started seeing a chiropractor and he really got me understanding how important it is for our spine to be in alignment, because our spinal cord houses our nervous system. And if there's a kink somewhere, then the messages can't get sent for healing. I saw a polarity specialist at one point. We're all in energy. So to try to balance that energy, I mean, there's for all of us, because we're all just bio individuals, it could be 100 things we have to fix in order to achieve that optimal health.
Yeah.
But it's our responsibility to figure out what that is and explore those options.
And most people don't know that. Most people don't know or understand it. They just know something's wrong and they need to get it fixed, and they want the fix right away. They don't understand that there's a lot of internal work that happens too. It's we are our own bodies. Each one of us are individual. What would work for you might not work for me or someone else, right? What we're carrying on is all we know. All right, so we have Crohn's now, and then, from the Crohn's, from going to, the wellness center, understanding more and more about nutrition, that brings you up to all of a sudden now, you get your holistic health coach, you become a holistic health coach and all of that. And then you find cancer.
Yeah. So it kind of funny, changing my diet and everything, I eliminated a lot of my symptoms. Like I was having arthritis symptoms, I was having MS symptoms, I was able to get rid of those. The pain was becoming less. My stools were starting to form again. I didn't have that chronic diarrhea where I was having accidents out in public, the bleeding stopped, my hair's, so I had healed a lot of the symptoms that I had, but for whatever reason, and I don't know if it was scar tissue or I just could never get the inflammation to settle down. Last year, I developed an enterocutaneous fistula during COVID, and it ended up bursting, creating a hole through my stomach in July of last year. And I had been trying to get a hold of a GI just to see me, but nobody was calling me back. So I ended up having this rupture with the hole coming out of my skin, leaking bowel. I went to the hospital. They did a CAT scan. They said, okay, this is what you have. You have an enterocutaneous fistula. They said the hole is small enough that we think it'll heal on its own. So they sent me home like that without and they said, you might want to try to get a hold of a GI. So again, I got, looked through the yellow pages, I called probably 20 to 30 GIs. Nobody ever answered the phone. I always had to leave a message and nobody ever called me back.
COVID was crazy. Just the surgeons, the doctors, everything everybody was going through. It was just such a crazy time. My heart goes out to people who were going through health issues during that time, because you weren't getting seen, you weren't getting heard, you weren't getting calls back. And that's a whole nother story. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Not going to go down that rabbit hole. So now you're in COVID. So finally somebody gets back to you and they find.
Well, somebody didn't get back to me until February of this year.
Wow.
So I went from July to February leaking bowel through my stomach.
Wow.
And the person that finally called me back was a laparoscopic colorectal surgeon. And so they got me in, they saw me, he checked the hole out and he's like, you're going to need surgery. Mm-hmm. His best friend happens to be a GI. So he said, I want you to go see my friend. We work well together. He said, he'll do a colonoscopy. We'll find out what's going on in there before we schedule the surgery. Mm-hmm. And I said, all right. So I went and saw him. We scheduled the colonoscopy. I was probably only under for 10 to 15 minutes before they woke me up. And my GI said, I was only able to get about a quarter of the way through. He said, you have so much scar tissue in there that I couldn't get the scope through any further. He said, I tried to take some biopsies, or he said, I took some biopsies in that area, so we'll see. Well, the biopsies ended up coming back that there was dysplasia. Mm-hmm. So, going into surgery, I knew that they were going to remove my colon because they couldn't see past it. Mm-hmm. They only were able to get a little bit up the left side. So my surgeon was like, we're just going to take it out because I don't know what's on the other side. Right. So the surgery was scheduled, I think, for about 4 hours. It ended up taking 7. And they call me the miracle. My GI actually wrote a paper on me and presented it at a conference. Wow. When they went in, and I'm grateful that he was able to do everything laparoscopically, but when they went in, that fistula had created so much infection in my stomach that it was just everywhere. But my peritoneum had encapsulated it, so it didn't spread throughout my body. It was
lucky.
Yeah, and what was weird, I never had symptoms. Like I never had a fever. As soon as that thing popped, I didn't have pain anymore. Wow. And so it took him 2 hours just to clean out the infection before he could go in and actually remove the colon. So my whole surgery, I think, was almost 8 hours.
Wow. So now you come out, now you have an ostomy. So you have an ileostomy?
Yes.
Okay. So your entire large intestine, your entire colon's gone. So now you have an ileostomy. And that was 5 months ago?
That was I had my surgery June 7th. Mm-hmm. And when a couple weeks after the removal is when they contacted me and said that they had found cancerous tumors in my colon. But he said he did biopsies on 87 lymph nodes, and only 1 came back with abnormal cells. He said it wasn't dysplasia. He did recommend that I do chemo, but for the next 2 or 3 months after that, I researched pros and cons, kind of sat with it to see, and just because I've never done good with medications, I just felt like that wasn't the road for me. Like I had educated myself enough that I knew how to take care of myself from this point forward.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's huge. So now you've had this for 5 months. You turned down the chemo, are you strictly, holistic, organic, whole food diet, nothing processed, all of that, right?
No, Yeah, everything's organic. I don't eat any kind of gluten grains. I don't eat out at restaurants really. I mean, there's a handful that I trust because I can get good quality food there, especially living here in Southern California, you know.
Right. Yeah, you've
So,
got some good food there.
yeah, so I have some decent options, but for the most part, I love cooking anyway. So I just make everything myself. A month ago, I just started back at the gym, so I'm excited about that. I mean, because since surgery, I've gained about 40 pounds, a little bit more than I want to be carrying, but I'm finally feeling good enough where I'm like, okay, I can get back in and get, in shape, get strong again. When I was at my sickest point, I had told myself if I ever have the opportunity to get out and move my body again, that I will no longer take it for granted, because when you lose those abilities, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a non-negotiable, and I'm going to do it for those that don't have those abilities.
Mhm. It's amazing, the feeling you get after when you get to the other side of, the struggle of, cancer or whatever, the fear of even having an ostomy. I don't know if you even had that, that thought in your head, because it was just like, this is the way it's going to be. And I need to get rid of this because, because I need to live my life. Did you have any thoughts about what life would be like, having an ostomy?
Um, I never really thought of it, but I never really thought what it would be like,
Mhm.
but I never thought that I would have restrictions because of it,
Mhm.
and I still don't. I'm like, okay, I want to do that. I'm going to try it.
Right.
And if I don't feel right doing it, then I won't. But I don't see it as a roadblock in my journey. I tell a lot of people, because when I tell my story, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened. And I'm like, don't feel sorry for me, because through this whole journey, I've thought, one, what am I supposed to learn from this?
Mhm.
And two, this did not happen to me, it happened for me. It made
Mhm.
me a better person all the way around.
Mhm.
It's given me knowledge that I didn't have before. It's given me a passion to help others, you know? And
Mhm.
so I'm like, don't feel bad. Like, to me, I find it a blessing. And yeah, I have had, I hear a lot of people, and I can imagine if you went into a surgery not expecting an ostomy, to wake up and be like, oh my gosh, what happened?
Mhm.
I've had my health home nurse has referred a couple of her patients to me that are kind of like freaking out. And she's like, talk to my friend. She'll
Mhm.
get you off the ledge. But I never, thought of it as a bad thing, and it's only been 5 months. I mean, there were a couple times that I looked down and started crying. I'm like, oh, this thing is ugly,
Exactly. Exactly. But you have those emotions. You're supposed to have that feeling. I mean, you're supposed to
Yeah,
have those roller coaster moments of, because your life completely changes. But I love what you said, whereas now it's like you're doing things. I mean, you're even in 5 months, you're going back to working out, to exercising, to do to go and do all of those beautiful, things that you couldn't do when you were sick.
right.
You didn't have that freedom, where this actually seems like it gave you that freedom to be able to do those things. you know if there was one thing that you would want the listeners to know, what would that be?
Probably just the only limitations that you have are those that you set upon yourself, you know, that you
Mhm.
think you have anywhere, any point during your journey.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, our bodies are such amazing machines that, and our minds as well, we're capable of whatever we set our minds to. And we are so much stronger than we think we are.
Right. And we are, and we really, really are. We got to dig deep sometimes. And I think, you know, surrounding ourselves with positive people or a community that you can reach out to or a better understanding of things. You know, what was that like for you? What was, you know, you had your parents, you had your mom. What was it like for you from a community perspective when you have your ostomy and now you're online and you're looking around and you're like, oh, hey.
Um, I don't know. I didn't feel different
Mhm,
really. You know, I just felt more alive. You know, and for a long time my family had been saying, "You need to get this done," you know? And I'm
mhm,
like, "This is my journey. You know, I'm not going to tell you what to do along if you ever have to deal with anything like, you know, I will
mhm.
support you and walk alongside of you, but you know, I just need you to love me and accept my decisions." You know, and like I told my mom too, I think for a long time I kind of sheltered myself because it was like the same conversation with people, you know, like, "Oh, how are you feeling?" You know, and it's like somebody that's sick, they're living it with that 24 hours a day.
Right,
They don't want to have to talk about it. They want to be able to get their mind off of it, you
right,
know?
right, right. Nope, I agree. I agree. Well, Heather, you know, this has been, you know, a great learning experience, a great story. You know, is there anything left, you know, is there anything else that you would like the listeners to know?
Um just maybe if you're new to the ostomy world, see it for as an opportunity and not a hindrance. Um, you know, also too, I found speaking to other new ostomates that a lot of times we're not given the information that we need to thrive. You know, we need to be drinking at least 54 ounces of water a day to,
Mhm.
you know, because we are so susceptible to dehydration. Chewing our food properly. I had talked to a guy who, as soon as he was given the go ahead to eat, he ate and ended up with a blockage because he didn't chew his food properly, you know?
Right,
And I
right.
was like, "Did your doctor tell you that?" And he said, "No, they never said anything to me like
Mhm,
that." You know? It's just, I, you know, if there's something that you want to achieve in life, follow people that are already leading that example, you know? And that's kind of been my motto. Okay, you know, looking through the community with osmates, what are they doing, you know? Okay, so I can do that, you know? Or just a health journey. If somebody's got, there's this one girl that I've been following for years. I didn't even know she had an ostomy until about 2 years ago. She doesn't share it often, but she follows the same kind of diet that I do. And I started following her just because I wanted some kind of connection that, you know, that I wasn't crazy doing what I was doing.
right. Yep.
So,
And people are out there. Now, if people wanted to find you, to reach out to you, to find you, to, you know, ask you questions, where is the best place for them to go?
well, I have Instagram, Heather Moffatt Healing, and then I also have a Facebook, which is the same, Heather Moffatt Healing.
Right, great, great. So I will make sure to put those in the show notes too, so people can reach out to you that way. And Heather, you know, thank you so much for being here with us this week and for sharing your story.
My
You know,
pleasure. Thank
I know
you.
it'll help people to say, hey, maybe I need to pay attention to what food I'm putting in my body, and maybe I need to take some things into my own hands.
Or
You know,
just
to
even
try
the
something.
thoughts we're putting into our own body.
Exactly, exactly. So, well, thank you so much for being here with us this week. Truly have appreciated it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.